Oh, I'm live. Okay. Hi, everyone. S. Conley here, and it's time for my monthly video again. And today we're going to be discussing the ethics of magic. So, this is a topic where people really tend to get pissed off. And I say that because, excuse me, I say that because unfortunately, everybody has their own set of ethics when it comes to magic. And some people say, if you're practicing black magic, that you shouldn't have any ethical qualms about anything. And quite frankly, I disagree with that because I think that you should have some sort of litmus test that tells you what you're going to waste your energy on. So, and whether or not it's actually worth it, and whether or not you're willing to accept the consequences of your actions. And I think this, excuse me, this gets easier to do as you get older and you go through various situations in your life, and you start learning what you want to waste your energy on and what you don't. And the problem is that we all start out kind of curse happy. I always say that everybody goes through a curse happy phase. Um, whether it's Satanism, demonolatry, traditional witchcraft, everybody goes through that phase where they're like, anybody does anything wrong to you, or you just don't like the looks of them, or they stole your boyfriend, or whatever it is, you're going to curse them. That's just the nature of the beast. I think most, not most, I don't know. No, we're going to say most people go through that phase. And I don't think it matters necessarily with age. I have seen people who just start out into magic in their 30s and 40s and 50s even, who go through a curse happy phase. I think it's something we all do, that sympathetic magic. There's something very appealing about it. Excuse me. Got a touch of a cold. Either that or as I'm talking, I'm not getting enough liquid in my mouth. Dry throat. So the first thing, obviously, when we're discussing ethics in magic, the two areas where I think the most ethical discernment is required is in both cursing and love magic. So with cursing, first of all, again, it's about whether or not you really want to waste energy on something. Is it really worth it if you're jealous of someone that you want to curse them, or if you hate someone because they did something wrong, are you going to curse them? I always like take a look at the source. Is their life better than yours? Are they being a jerk just to be a jerk? Have they actually killed somebody? Have they done something that has destroyed somebody else's life? And I mean, not by destroyed like emotionally destroyed you. I'm talking destroyed somebody's life, made them lose property, people they love, their livelihood, those sorts of things. As to whether or not it's worth cursing them. Most of the times, it's just a lot easier to say fuck off. So let's just be honest there. And not because I think that there's a threefold law. There's that whole thing about the threefold law that you get with Wicca. A lot of people don't stop to realize that there is more to the Wiccan Rede than those 8 words that everybody's always so fond of like rattling off. And harm none, do what you will, or whatever it is. There's a lot more to it. If somebody attacks you, you can curse in self-defense, even in Wicca. Okay, so just throwing that out there, because so many people seem to have just forgotten that end of it, or conveniently swept it under the rug because it wasn't politically correct. So it's more of, are you going to feel guilty about it later? Are you going to feel guilty? Will you accept the responsibility of what you're about to do? Because the reality is that cursing can have some really, you can overreach, you can overshoot, and it will hit your target, or possibly somebody very close to them, that pretty much destroys them. And are you willing to, take that on yourself and say, I caused that to happen. Can you live with yourself? Because the minute you start feeling guilt, a lot of times we start bringing that back on ourselves. That's where you get it will come back on you. It's only going to come back on you if you feel guilty about it. So if you did something that you probably shouldn't have done, if you curse somebody because maybe you were jealous of them and they ended up dying, and you're like, oh, I didn't want that to happen. There you go. I had a young lady not too long ago who asked me for a curse, and I told her I went through the whole thing, and she's like, no, I still want to curse this guy. I was dating him. He smacked me down in a parking lot in front of a bunch of other people. And I want to get back at him for that. And I was like, okay, well, that seems reasonable. He was abusive, yada, yada, yada. Here's the information you need, the supplies you need. Go ahead. Well, she cursed him, and 2 weeks later he died. So ended up getting into a car accident, and she was so devastated. And she was like, I wanted to give him a dose of the pain that I had felt, but I had no idea he would die. And she really just beat herself up about that, even though he was a complete jerk and he had it coming, obviously. I mean, personally, I wouldn't have felt remorse for that. But I need more coffee. Sorry, my throat gets dry as I'm like rambling on here. But the question you have to ask yourself is if this person dies, if I do this curse and something happens that, maybe I wasn't expecting, because, sometimes magic doesn't always work in the exact way we expect it to. And sometimes there's no way to actually make it work the exact way we expect it to. If something unexpected happens, will you be able to live with the consequences, or will you bring that back on yourself? So when I'm talking about ethical, I'm talking about how you feel about it. What do you have to live with the rest of your life? And the same thing goes with love magic. A lot of people will warn you against love magic, and I swear I get emails about this all the time. People want me to work love magic for them because they want a specific person to love them, even though that person seriously does not have any feelings for them. And there's no chance in hell that it didn't work. It didn't work the first time, and there's probably a reason for that. Some people just really have a hard time letting go. And I catch a lot of flack for this because I'm like, you know what? If you want to do love magic, that's fine. You can do that because that's very manipulative. At that point, that's almost a curse, because in its own way, because you are manipulating a situation and affecting somebody else's life. And the thing about love magic is a lot of the times what we think we want is not actually what we want. It's what we want in the moment. I may be angry with someone like right now, but am I going to be angry with them 2 days from now? Is it really going to matter? You have to that's why I also say, at least for cursing, there should be wait 3 days. And a lot of people say, don't do that because then you lose all that anger. Yeah, but you got to have time to think it through. Do you really want to do this? Now, if you've been thinking about it for a long time and you still really hate somebody and they've really fucked you over, then by all means, curse the hell out of them, whatever. But I don't recommend just going willy-nilly and doing it just spur of the moment, because again, if you haven't thought it through, there could be unintended consequences that you'll feel guilt for. With love magic, a lot of different things can happen. So first of all, you think you want this person, but then you get back together with this person, and then you remember why you didn't work out the first time, or you find out they're really not exactly what you wanted, and you end up in a position where now you need to get rid of the person. So then you either have to try and break your own love spell, or wait it out until it wears off. And one of the stories I'm fond of telling is the story about when I was much younger, and there was a guy that I wanted to date, and I was like, oh, he's just so dreamy, yada, yada, yada. I did a love spell on him, and sure enough, boom, he came to me. We started going out and everything. And then I realized he was kind of a shiftless layabout, and he had no prospects or any ambition to do anything with his life. He was still living in his mom's basement. And here I was, a woman living on her own, making her own way in the world. And I had this boyfriend that was still, a mommy's boy, who I couldn't, I just couldn't deal with that. And I was like, I really need to get rid of this guy. So I kind of started not answering his calls and trying to avoid him. And then he started showing up on my doorstep. And then he would show up at really odd times, looking for a booty call or whatever. And I'm just like, are you freaking kidding me? And I had inadvertently created almost a stalker. I had to wait that out almost 2 years before I got rid of him. I had been dating someone else because I had gone out with him for about a year, or maybe it was 6 months. But then I kind of broke it off with him, and then he kept kind of showing up, and then I started dating someone else, and he was still showing up, and it was a big mess. So you really have to stop and think about it. What if I don't really like this person? Now, I have heard stories where on occasion, maybe a love spell, if it's done properly and not done on a specific person, those I don't mind, because then you're asking the demonic divine to bring someone to you who is good for you, who you have a chance with actually getting along with and building a relationship. The problem is when you start getting really specific about what you want. And I always say, with magic, oftentimes you do want to be very specific about what you want. And you can be with, like soulmate work or love work where you're trying to bring the right person into your life. You can list qualities that you want that person to have. And you can be specific that way. But when you start getting specific into, I want this person, you're trying to put that person into what you really want in a relationship. And if that person doesn't fit that mold, then you're kind of stuck with them until that love spell wears off. The other bad thing about love magic is you do like love workings, love rituals, or whatever, and you end up, not only do you end up with obviously with a person that maybe you don't really want, but there's an issue there of manipulating that other person to where at some point it's going to start wearing off. And then you're going to have to reinforce it. And you're going to have to keep redoing that magic over and over again so that you keep them interested in you. Because maybe on their own, without that influence of the magic, they would not want to be with you. So what a pain in the ass that would be. Could you imagine? I don't know. I've known people, I don't know any instance where a love spell on a specific person has ever turned out well. It's always turned out pretty bad in the end. So keep it general as opposed to, or in the framework of who it is, but you can be very specific about, I want him to have a sense of humor. I want her to be very confident, whatever it is that you are looking for specifically. And so the responsibility there, in the context of love magic, is to make sure that you know what you really want, first of all, and second, can you live with it if it turns out to be not what you want? Can you wait it out until it wears off? So that is the good thing about love magic, is oftentimes it will wear off. So whereas a curse, if you throw that out there, something happens eventually, yeah, it's going to wear off too. But if it kills somebody, you can't really reverse that. So those are things you need to consider. Now, the other thing you need to consider when you're working magic, and whether or not it's ethically sound, is, are you doing the self-work to back it up? Like, for example, let's say you are pissed off at somebody at work who took credit for something you did, and they're trying to knock you out of the way so they can get this position that should be yours since you're the senior person at this job. And so you do curse work and you get that person out of the way, and they're no longer with the company. You get the job, yada, yada. But then the next person comes in and starts jockeying for your job and trying to take credit for your work and push you aside and get you fired. So the question then becomes, you have to stop and look at, first of all, yourself. Are you doing the inner work to make sure that maybe you're not in some way causing people to, I mean, some people are just jerks, let's just face it. But are you doing the internal work to help yourself get over maybe these feelings of insecurity about other people taking your work? Does your work not speak for itself? Is there something you could be doing to improve yourself? So the situations like this, even if they are happening, you don't have to sit there and curse everybody who starts getting in your way. You can be confident enough in your skills and what you're doing that you don't feel threatened by these people who come in and try to take credit for your work. Are you not speaking up if somebody else is taking credit for your work? Are you not speaking up and saying, hey, actually, I was the one who worked on that. You didn't do anything. And are you saying that to the right people? I mean, it's great to bitch about everything behind everybody's back, but do you have the balls to actually say to your boss, actually, I would like you to know that I was the one who worked on that. And while so-and-so did give me some input, I'm the one who did all the work. And of course, some people will be like, oh, well, that's just petty, whatever. The fact of the matter is are you standing up for yourself? Are you letting people get away with bad behavior? And is cursing like a passive aggressive thing? I know the whole sympathetic magic thing seems appealing when we don't like confrontation. But if you don't like confrontation, maybe that's something you should work on within yourself. Because the more you work on yourself, the less you need magic for these small things. So the thing about demonolatry and Satanism and magic is a lot of people don't realize that a lot of it is about internal change. It's not just about getting stuff. It's not just about the low magic, about, throwing magic at every problem you have. It's about actually getting down into the deep, dark recesses of yourself and trying to fix and improve yourself in ways that you can. And sometimes there are things, everyone, is so big on self-acceptance these days. I'm great just the way I am. But are we all really great just the way we are? Isn't there room for improvement for all of us in some way? I mean, if you're constantly letting people push you around, you can't just constantly for the rest of your life throw magic at the problem. At some point, you have to gain the confidence to speak up for yourself. And yeah, sometimes, that may get you into trouble. And, somebody else who's very insecure about that may say, okay, fine, I'm firing you. I don't want you working for me anymore because you stood up to me. But at the same time, isn't it worth it to stand up for yourself and to build that confidence? Years ago, I used to be terrified of public speaking. And I actually got up in front of a room of people one day and was and froze up right in front of an audience of about 30 people. It was a small group, thank goodness. I couldn't imagine if it had been like a bigger group. I have a lot of anxiety with public speaking, or I did many years ago. And luckily, there were other people on this panel, and one of my friends who was there on that panel, she jumped up and she kind of took over. And she was a lawyer. So she jumped up and she kind of took over the entire presentation. And I was able to sit down and calm myself and get myself back into the place where I could actually speak to people again. I could have just thrown magic at that and continued not trying to learn how to do public speaking and allowed that fear to ward me away from public speaking forever. But instead, I actually chose to keep forcing myself to do more public speaking, which is pretty horrifying when you're an introvert and you just don't like crowds of people in general. So, but I did that. And over the years, and it probably took about 10 years or so, over the years, I started getting better. And each time I do a public speaking engagement, I'd get better. And then I'd get better. And eventually I got to a point where everything was good and I don't freeze up nearly as much. There have been times where I'll stop and freeze up, but usually it's because my mind, I have a hard time staying focused. When I'm in a room full of people, I'm easily distracted by movement and people moving in and out of the room. And so I have to really find focus points when I do that. But I know this about myself. And that's what the inner work is all about. It's about knowing yourself, because the more you know yourself, the more you realize that, that magic should be used for some things, can be used for some things. Sometimes it's better in a greater context. But for every little thing, for every little life problem that you have, magic isn't always necessarily the solution. Sometimes the solution is changing the way you think about the problem, and perhaps changing your reaction to the problem, because you can't control how other people behave. No matter how hard you try, magic is, in a sense, in a lot of ways, when you're dealing with magic that influences other people, that is a method by which we try to control others, and we try to make them do what we want them to. Whereas when you were dealing with yourself and working on yourself and using magic internally, you are changing the way you look at the situation and becoming more self-reliant, and not needing so much to control what other people are doing, simply controlling your reaction to it. So I had one guy come to me and say, well, every time I try to stand up for myself, I get in trouble, I get fired, my wife gets mad at me, all of these things happen. And I said, okay, have you stopped and looked at your delivery? When you're standing up to yourself, there's a difference between saying, I don't think your assessment is fair, and maybe we need to discuss this because I see it completely differently, and I'd like to share that with you, versus you're an asshole, fuck off. Those are two different responses, and they're both, both instances are you standing up for yourself, but there's one that's like not a tactful way to do it, and one that people will be more receptive to, and one where people are immediately, the minute you start, name calling or raising your voice or getting aggressive, the other person's going to shut down, close off, and automatically you're in the wrong no matter what you say. Even if you're right, you're wrong. So there are things that you have to learn how to navigate that are probably going to make life a little easier. I think we've all had these issues in life that we've had to work through. And if you haven't gotten there yet, you will have to work through them at some point. So that is, basically the scope of the inner work that you have to do in order to make it to where, your low magic is more effective, is more potent, and you don't have to use it nearly as much. So now that I'm kind of done with that, are there any questions? Does anyone have any specific questions? You can go ahead and use the chat box over here. I should probably check to see if the chat box. Oh, I should go to live chat. Hold potentially inappropriate messages for review. Sure, let's turn it on, just because there's always people. Oh, okay, so there has been conversation here. While I was talking, I just had it all off. So, so while I was saying that he or she doesn't really know how anyone can really want fake love, that's another thing too. If you've ever been the victim of a love spell, it's not a good feeling when it finally dawns on you what's happened. And it's hard to imagine why somebody wouldn't want the real thing and wouldn't want someone that's actually good for them. So I have a hard time understanding that too, but there are people out there who really do believe that they belong with this one particular person. And I don't, begrudge them those feelings. Obviously, they have those feelings for a reason, but it's really nice when the other person reciprocates those feelings. Unfortunately, there are some people that you will love in your life that just aren't going to love you in the same way you love them. So, and that it sucks, but Amanda says love magic should really be called passion magic. Passion is fiery but temporary, while love is usually built within a stable relationship. I agree, because it is. It's in the heat of the moment when we are most tempted to work love magic and curses. It's out of passion. It's out of this deep emotion that we have right now in the moment, and that's kind of looking, not looking before you leap. That's kind of what I'm thinking here. So as long as you're always looking before you jump into the fray, you should be fine. Or at least, having a backup plan if things don't go the way you want. Let's see. I'm looking to see if there are any other questions. Okay. So Patrick asks a question. Now this is like completely off topic, but why not? We'll go ahead and cover it. He asks, how do you know you're experiencing possession or a more openness with a demonic entity? Okay, so I think I talked maybe last time around when I was talking about semantics, and a lot of the times, a lot of arguments in the occult community begin because we're not defining things in the same way. Like some people view evocation as the same thing as invocation, or summoning or conjuring, and they'll just kind of lump all those together. English is one of those languages that has very subtle differences, very subtle nuances. So possession kind of suggests that it's against your will. A lot of the times when people who work with demons, whether they be Satanists, Demonolators, witches, however they label themselves, when they often say possession, what they actually mean is channeling. And that is willfully allowing a demonic force to come through and use your body. Use your mouth, use your hands, as in automatic writing, or use your mouth if you're actually trying to channel the demon to speak. There are different words have different nuances. So I would call that channeling. Now, if you're talking just a connection or communication, that's a totally different thing than channeling. Channeling is actually drawing the demonic force through you and letting it use your physical form for some reason. Possession in and of itself, when it comes to demonic possession, is actually very rare. A lot of what the Catholics and Christians view as demonic possession has actually been debunked as not actual supernatural possession, but mental problems, psychological disorders, illnesses, physiological illnesses like epilepsy, or people who just have histrionic disorders, which means they're attention seeking, they're drama queens. People who, schizophrenia, that's a good one, Sophia. So all of these things have been labeled demonic possession, and that's not really what demonic possession is. Just remember, demons are divine intelligences. Now, I do believe that artists of any type, whether they be musicians, whether they be painters, drawers, sculptors, writers, can be possessed with divine intelligence, especially during the creative process. You've heard the phrase, he painted as if he were possessed, that sort of thing. I do believe that type of possession does exist. And I have heard of instances where people have these stories that they tell where they actually do believe that they have been possessed by a demon for the greater good of something. There was a purpose. It wasn't just to sit there and snarl and growl and masturbate and say fuck. There was a purpose behind it. Very rarely, I mean, just to have somebody sit there and be blasphemous, that's ridiculous. I mean, that's child's play. Let's see. We'll go ahead and show that. So I think maybe Patrick's question is actually, how do you know? If you would know if you were experiencing possession, because possession, there's like an urgency to it. Because there's purpose behind it. You may know things that you don't normally know. You may have flashes of insight that you don't normally have. You may feel the urge to create something that you've never felt like creating, and you'll go through the process of actually doing, not just thinking, but actually doing it. So possession actually motivates you to action, and there's an urgency behind it. Now, if you're talking about how do you know if you're actually communicating, when you know yourself and you know your energy and you have mastered the fundamentals of magic, you can actually feel the change in the atmosphere when there is a demonic presence. You actually have learned the discernment to tell between, I'm just sitting here in a room by myself, I'm sitting here in a room with another person, or I'm sitting here in a room by myself and there's something else here that isn't normally here when I'm sitting in this room by myself. You start learning these very subtle distinguishing elements between the different types of energy that are around you. So, but that comes with practice. It does come with a lot of practice. My suggestion is that all practitioners learn the fundamental basics of magic and get your fundamentals down. That is one of the things, unfortunately, that we lack. And as a matter of fact, next month's topic is the fundamentals of magic. So you'll want to tune in for that if you can, or at least check out the video after it's done. So you definitely want to learn that, because part of that is energy work. And that energy work goes a long way into helping you learn discernment. So there's that. Okay, let's go back through the questions here. Ryan asks, what are the signs you are a victim of love or passion magic? If you suddenly find yourself pining after somebody who you didn't like before, I would be questioning that and really looking into what your actual motivation for liking that person is. Because generally, when people are going to throw love magic at you, they're going to already know you in some way. And you're already going to have had a reaction to that person. Generally, people don't randomly throw love magic on random people they've never met before. So I would say that you know them and that you didn't have feelings for them before, but suddenly you feel like you're starting to have feelings and you're like, where did that come from? That's generally a good clue. So start with that. And then, if you're feeling that way, then I would do some sort of magic breaker cleansing throughout your space, reestablish your wards around your house, and then sleep on it. And if you wake up the next day and you still feel the same, maybe not love magic. But if you don't feel the same and you're like, yeah, I don't really like this person, definitely love magic. And then you should go about trying to break the spell. It's a lot easier if you know exactly what type of ritual or spell was used to put the love magic on you. So if you know what type of magic that person might be into, it's a lot easier to kind of guess. But not always. Some people are very, very much chaos magicians. So you just have to kind of go with it and try to figure it out. Okay, let's see. How do you go about working with an entity? I always say the first thing you want to do before you start working with any entity is introduce yourself. If you were walking down the street and you saw someone who looked interesting, you wouldn't just walk over there and start asking them for things. You would go over there and say, hey, hi, I'm so-and-so, and you are, and get to know them and talk to them and see if they're even interested in working with you or anything. And then you could say, hey, I'd like to talk to you some more. Let's have coffee. That's how it kind of works with human relationships. And that is kind of how it works with spiritual relationships. So I always suggest that you take the N of and the sigil of the spirit that you're interested in working with, and you sit down in meditation and concentrate on the sigil and use the N, maybe vibrate it a few times or chant it a few times, and just close your eyes and let that demonic energy come in and then feel it out. Again, this is where your fundamentals in magic practice is really important, because you can kind of feel out the energy, find out if there's any resistance, whether or not you and that demon's energy mesh, see if there's any insight to be gained just by being quiet and listening, and just kind of slowly introduce yourself to that demon. A lot of people just automatically jump straight to offerings or straight to bloodletting or anything like that. And it's that's maybe a little too forward sometimes. Sometimes that'll work and it'll be great. And the demon's like, yeah, hey, other times it doesn't always work so well. So start with a slow introduction, kind of get yourself acquainted with that demon's particular energy. And then, slowly work into the work with that particular demonic force. So that's my suggestion. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so let's see. Which demonic spirits can teach you to defend yourself against a curse? The interesting thing is okay, so like what we have as magicians is we have these catalogs or books that tell us what these demons allegedly rule over. So, and I even say this in the complete book of Daemonolatry, that what a lot of what's listed there from Christian hierarchies, a lot of what's listed in those in your demonic hierarchies that you find just about anywhere, and even in the Goetia, are from a very Judeo-Christian centralized viewpoint. So it's all like, gluttony, sloth, lust, all this crap. But when you look at it on a larger scale and you go into it a little deeper, you're going to find that demons are multifaceted energy beings. There are a lot of different things that you can work with specific demons with. One of the things you want to learn how to do, because I always get these questions in email and PM. I want to do this kind of working. Which demon should I work with? Which demon should I work with? You can learn how to maybe assess and try working with different demons for a particular topic all on your own without having to ask or look it up. Well, you might have to look it up because there are correspondences. So everything foundationally in Magick, and I wasn't even going to talk about this until next weekend, but this is a good segue into that particular topic. Everything that we have listed with demons are different correspondences. We have elemental correspondences. We have planetary correspondences. We even have plant matter and stone correspondences. And sometimes even like, moon phase correspondences, whatever it is. All of these things have the same meaning across most foundations of Western magic. All the planets tend to rule over the same types of things. All the elements have certain influences that they rule over. And you can look at any particular demon and find out what their planetary and elemental properties are, and from that kind of gather the types of things you can work with that demon for. So for example, let's just be really, boring here and say Belial. In the Goetic hierarchy, Belial is fire. In the Ducante hierarchy, Belial is earth. Well, interestingly enough, he's actually fiery earth because we celebrate him during one of the biggest fire festivals of the year, which is the winter solstice. So you have like that earthy fire thing going. So if you're working with him in a Goetic sense, you may be working with this fire aspect. Whereas if you're working with him from a from a Ducante sense, you're working with his earth aspect. So what do we know about the element earth, for example? The element earth is stable. It's grounding. It is about prosperity, fertility, manifestation, things in the physical world, bringing things about in the physical world, careers, jobs, home. I think I said stability. Those are all of the properties of earth. So what can you gather about Belial from those things, from that earthy property? So same thing, right? So if you're doing prosperity work, for example, you could work with Belial. If you're, and you also have to take into account his fiery aspects, because Belial brings action, actually manifests. That's where the manifestation comes in, because fire is a very manifesting, it's very active. It's actually doing instead of sitting around thinking about it. That's air. Air is sitting around thinking about things and planning and learning about things and going deep into introspection. That's why you'll find like a lot of, Luciferians and everything, their whole thing is illumination. That's why air rules over illumination. And if you're looking for help with like the emotional and wisdom and having good judgment, you're going to go with a demon that rules over water. So when you're defending yourself against curses, you can work with fire demons to basically burn those curses up, to actively defend against them, and to actively attack back. If you want a very aggressive measure, you could work with a fire demon for that. If you are looking to thwart a curse through showing the other person wisdom, you could work with water. If you're looking to thwart a curse by building your defenses and making them stable and manifesting them in the real world, you would work with an earth demon. So any of those three would be a good choice. It just really depends. And it also depends which demonic forces you have an affinity with. So there are a good number of demons you can work with to defend yourself against curses. I almost said defend yourself against the dark arts. That's how much of a nerd I am. Thank you very much. What herbs do you suggest for blockages when working with ancient entities or the demon kings? A lot of the times, there are some very common herbs that you can use for that. Frankincense is one. You can also use myrrh. These are like classical. If you don't have any of that around, you can actually use salt for cleansing yourself to get rid of blockages. You can also use sage. That's why everybody is saging everything, because sage is naturally one of those cleansing herbs. So again, there are many herbs that you can use for that. So if you find a puppet behind your bed, it's really obvious if the idiot admits to it. Oh, I'm sorry, we're still talking about, yeah, okay. If you're looking to clear blockages for financial and career success, I would work with a more fiery demonic force. You could consider, I would say you could consider Sorath. Sorath is maybe a bit overkill, but I think Belial would work well in that sense too, because of the fire aspect, especially when you're talking about finances. So, okay. Jordan, thank you. Yes, my office is a bit of a mess right now, but this is at least part of my library. Amanda says, that's where I get a bit confused. Planetary correspondence, herb stones. Got to read and meditate on it more. Thanks for answering. You're welcome. Jordan, yes. Solar energy. The interesting thing about solar energy is you have to kind of be careful with it and maybe temper it with a few other things, just so you don't get burnt, because fire demons have a tendency to kind of throw you, like pick you up and throw you right into the volcano and say, okay, have fun. I just gave you what you wanted. And it's kind of one of those be careful what you wish for things, because you will get it. It's just whether or not you can hack it. The good thing is you learn what you can hack and what you can't. And then you may have to go back to the drawing board again afterwards and say, okay, I'm good. Go back to the drawing board and then figure it out. Figure out what you need to work on before you jump it back into the fire again. So you can definitely get a sunburn there. Dragon's blood. Yes, dragon's blood is actually good for protection as well. Or cleansing. I guess people do use it for cleansing too. I've always seen dragon's blood as more of a protection herb, but I guess that kind of goes hand in hand, doesn't it? Okay, so I think we have all of the questions answered so far. Does anybody else have a question while I take another sip of my coffee because my throat's getting dry again? That's the bad thing about the Colorado air. It's so dry here. Everything's, your skin is dry, your lips are dry. You have to like suck down the water like crazy. Okay, so Wawa is saying that she calms down the energies in our home using cinnamon, star, anise, beryl leaves, and a big crystal. There you go. Patrick, one of the ways that demons find it very easy to communicate with us is through dreams. So keep a dream journal next to your bed and make sure you write stuff down when you get up, so it's fresh on your mind, and then you could refer back to it, because oftentimes they do communicate with us in dreams. And sometimes we may not always understand what they're trying to tell us, because a lot of times they'll use emotion and imagery. And sometimes they'll be just blunt and just come right out and tell you what they're trying to tell you. So you just have to, learn what that symbolism and what those emotions and everything mean in the context of what they're trying to tell you. So, and that seems easiest for a lot of people, just because we're more receptive when we're not actively doubting ourselves and our abilities to communicate with them, and not constantly doubting our experiences, which is very common. A lot of people do that. A lot of people who are very sensitive and who would otherwise be able to communicate with the demonic very easily have a very difficult time trusting themselves. So that's very common. If you're one of those people, you work at it. You just keep practicing the communication technique that you are working with. And at some point you are going to master that. You just have to continue working, be vigilant, and practice it every week, every day if you can, but if not, every week. So, so should you use a demon from each element to balance your request? So one of the interesting things that you have to understand is, one of the reasons we have beginners and we preach that elemental circle in the very beginning when you're starting Daemonolatry is most people new to the practice aren't used to the different demonic energies. So they get imbalanced very easily, and then they don't understand the imbalance. And, they'll be like, oh, after ritual, I just feel so exhausted. I just can't do this, Or they think, oh, I feel horrible because, the demon doesn't like me, or now I'm cursed, or whatever. So we developed the system to work in the elementally balanced circle to help the magician stay balanced while they're working with the demonic forces. It doesn't have anything to do with protection. It doesn't have anything to do with, having to have them there. Once you become more experienced and you understand what you need, like as the earthy part of water myself, that's my elemental alignment. When I do a lot of work with fire demons, I get dehydrated very quickly. So I have to bring water into the ritual space with me. So I know that about myself now. So I don't have to work within that balanced framework now that I'm, much more experienced. And once you kind of have a feel for what you need as an individual, and you kind of learn that about yourself, a lot of people end up foregoing that elemental circle in the end. So the balance, whether or not you should bring each demon bring in demons from each element to balance a request, is entirely up to the magician. It's something you should experiment with to see if you get better results that way, because it's going to vary from person to person. But really, I just wanted to point out that's the reason there's that balanced circle there. Usually you don't have to. If you're working with one particular demon on one thing, you're just starting out, go ahead and build that elemental circle to keep you balanced, to keep all the energy balanced, so you're not kind of thrown off your game. And then you pull the demonic force that you really want to work with from the center. That's how that works. Hey, Shay. Okay. Any crystals you recommend to help clear or assist with clairaudience? I don't really use a lot of crystals in my magic. I will use like clear quartz when I'm doing some scrying. That helps some people. It really depends on the person, though. I'm not much of a stone person. Actually, the person you should talk to about stones is Shaylin. And she's right there. Maybe she can answer that question. There you go. She gave you an answer right there. She said you can use selenite, labradorite, Herkimer diamonds, and Larimer. So you heard it here first. Thank you, Shay. Oh, thank you, Dylan. That's so sweet. He says, I can listen to you talk for ages, and I plan to. Thanks for all the wisdom. I appreciate that. Wow, you say you're bad at the communication stuff. But yeah, exactly. You seem to get answers by things and pictures. You're probably clairvoyant. You get images. So see, the thing of it is not everybody's gifts for communication are the same. Like some people are clairsentient. They just know things. They just know things to be true, and they don't know how they know it. It's just a gut feeling they have, and they kind of go with it, and they're right. They're dead on every single time. Those people are clairsentient. And I believe everybody has clairsentience to some degree. I think that's kind of an innate gift all humans have. Then there's clairaudience, where you actually hear things, not like hear it like, in the real world, but it's like you hear it in your mind's eye. Like you'll get words, you'll hear it's almost like your inner voice, but it's not quite your inner voice. And again, this is like one of those things that discernment you gain from practice and experience over the years. Because you're going to doubt and say, that's just my inner voice talking to me. You're going to do that for years and years and years until something proves to you and you get some sort of validation that that's not your inner voice, that's something else. And then you're going to start learning the discernment. So it's going to happen. But then other people will, in their mind's eye, they'll see images and they'll get pictures. And then some people will get all three of those and they'll get bombarded with it all at once. You'll get the feeling, you get the gut feeling, you'll get the images, you'll hear different words. And so you just have to know what your gifts are and play to that strength, really. So that's one of the harder things there. Oh, Amanda suggested amethyst for Jordan. And there we go. So yeah, if anyone ever has questions about like stones and everything, Shay is the bomb at that. So she runs Divine Energies, which she creates demonic imbued items. And she's also going to be doing oleums and everything here soon. So definitely watch for her, like her Facebook page, and you'll be kept up to date of all of her current offerings. And she has an Etsy store too. So that's Divine Energies is what it's called. So let's see. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and cut it short. Oh, Amanda, that's wonderful. I'm so excited. I'm hoping that we're going to be doing more Portuguese versions of some of the books through the same publisher. So that is the hope anyway. I'm trying to work to get them expanded into more languages because that's been really hard, finding the publishers who will do that. Okay, perfect. All right, guys, I'm going to let you go. I hope you have a great Thursday. And I will be, oh no, nothing in Swedish yet, unfortunately. We're still working on that. So I will be back next month. And next month, we're going to be talking about the fundamentals of magical practice. I don't have a date or anything like that, but the video will be saved. And I will make a little note on my S. Conley page on Facebook right before I go live. So you kind of know. I've been trying to do them kind of at the beginning of the month on a Thursday. On Thursdays, it just works for me better. So have a great rest of your day. Have a good weekend. And I will see you guys next month. Bye.